Hey, it's Jeremy from jeremy.net. So thank you for joining me. Thank you for popping in, checking out my live stream. Before we get started, I need to give a shout out. Shout outs to fellow comic creator and indie comic creator and supporter Peter Palmiotti. He is my first supporter on Patreon. So if you are somebody who's a fan of indie comics and a comic creator, I'm sure you've seen his work before and you're familiar with him. He also has a great YouTube channel. If you search for Peter Palmiotti on YouTube, his Human Art Studio channel will come up. He also has a Patreon as well. So if you look at Peter Palmiotti, patreon.com/Peter Palmiotti, you will see his channel as well. He is a fellow comic creator who's built a great community of fellow creators. He's brought a lot of people together. He has a studio synergy where he gets artists and writers from around the world and comic creators, letterers, inkers of all stripes, and brings them together to communicate, to talk, to share their work. And he is supporting my channel. I want to give him a great shout out. If you want to support my work too, there is a link in the channel in the description for this video, and I'll be adding it to the channel description. So thank you so much. Patreon helps support my time for making these videos, for making comics. I'll be posting exclusive content there in the coming weeks and months. So please go check that out. That's patreon.com/Jeremy. And now, on to the video. I see some folks popping in from the chat. Ion Rocks, always good to see you. Thanks for showing up. I see Justin H has popped in. Hello, Justin. Thank you for joining me this week. So my topic for this week that I wanted to jump off with was George Bridgman. In last week's stream, a conversation came up that George Bridgman can be kind of difficult to understand. I see Davi Grady has shown up. Hi, Davi. Thank you for joining us. George Bridgman can be difficult to understand as an artist. For those of you who don't know, George Bridgman is an old school art instructor. He taught at the Artist League in New York. He's taught many, many great artists. He's somebody that a lot of people have recommended over the years for studying if you're getting into comics in terms of his understanding of anatomy on a structural level. It's not just like this is what this muscle looks like, but how they look and feel and move. And that's why I grabbed this particular book, The Human Machine. They do have a book, and I believe it's called The Complete George Bridgman or something similar to that, but it has a collection of all of his books or some of the best lessons from all of his books. But before that, Dover Press used to publish these thin books, and there's like The Human Machine, George Bridgman's Guide to Life Drawing, George Bridgman's Heads, Hands, and Feet, or I think it's Heads, Hands, and Features. Heads, Hands, and Feet is the class I take with Carl Ganas. But anyway, he has a series of smaller books, and because I started studying Bridgman before the large complete book came out, all the books I have are all of his smaller books. And I wanted to sit down and kind of show you how I study George Bridgman, because I too did not get George Bridgman at all. When the first time I was shown his work, I think I was still in high school. And then even after that, somebody had given me one of his books. And it's sort of like they're not necessarily the prettiest, most elegant drawings. But for a long time, I didn't really understand what George Bridgman was trying to explain and show. And what he's really trying to show is, while he's drawing muscles, what he's trying to show you is the actual volume of these physical structures. For instance, like if you're talking about just drawing a simple cube, I'm going to bring the camera in so you can see this a little bit closer, because I realize this might be a little light and a little hard to see. But if you're just drawing a simple cube, George Bridgman is trying, basically, in the simplest way possible, what he's trying to express is the top, the side, and the front. Like he's trying to describe the simple sides of a particular muscle, the shape of it. And because muscles are very organic forms, those can be, it can get a little bit confusing to understand those things. But what I started learning after studying his work for a while, was I could kind of see into what he was describing. Let me bring this down a little bit more. All right. So what I was going to do here is show you in a couple of pages the way that I would usually study Bridgman. One of the things I did was once or twice a year, I would sit down with either The Human Machine or one of his other books, and I would sit down and I would draw the whole book. Now, when I draw it, I don't mean that I was copying the book in order to create a duplicate. I didn't want to have, here's George Bridgman and here's how close I can draw to George Bridgman. That was not the point of my studies. The point of my studies was to do a picture where my goal is to depict my understanding of what he's drawing. In other words, if I look at that drawing, can I understand what he's communicating? And then can I get the understanding on the paper? So it's not about looking like what he's drawing. It's about drawing what he's communicating. Not sure if that is completely clear. If you want me to elucidate more, then please feel free to ask. But let's start here. Let's say with this forearm drawing. And what I would usually do is I would have a red pencil for doing the bones. I'd have a blue pencil for doing muscles on top of that. And then I would have just a regular number 2 pencil if I was doing any surface anatomy. So I would go from light to darker to darkest. I mean, there was times when I tried doing it where I had different methods where I would say like well, actually it really wasn't that different. I was saying doing all of the bones in red and then all of the muscles in blue, but then I also did times where I would do like muscles that were contracting in one pose would be blue and muscles that were relaxing would be red. And I would do different types of methods. But I found over the long term, just saying going from light for a lighter thing like the red for the underdrawings was handy, and then going to something darker for muscles and then saving. So a lot of times I would really just do red and blue, and the black was only if I needed to draw something on top of that to really clarify the idea. So starting with this, I didn't even really get the shape of the bone that he had there, but usually the shapes, depends on the what I was studying. A lot of the drawings that I would study wouldn't necessarily, the shape of the bone wasn't necessarily the most important thing. But I'm starting very simply with just saying, he's drawing a very simple cylinder and showing us how it curves. This long, the bone almost seems kind of tubular at some points. And it's weird because in drawing this, part of just what I've known from studying anatomy is that this bone actually flattens out a bit towards the bottom part, and I kind of want to like flatten it out a little bit more just because I'm thinking about what I know as opposed to what I'm seeing in the picture. And I think that's one of the challenges of Bridgman. There's places in there where you draw stuff, you're like, well, wait, I don't think this is supposed to look like that. He communicates. Sometimes some of his drawings are a little bit, I don't want to say obtuse, but you kind of have to look into them and figure out what it is that he's trying to say. And I think that is part of those big challenges that a lot of people have when they do look at Bridgman, is that you look at it and you expect, if someone is teaching, you expect them to just simply show what they're teaching. You want it to be pretty straightforward. You expect to see something that's very clear, and if the answer is 2 + 2 = 4, you expect to see 2 + 2 = 4. I see Kaz has shown up in the chat. Thanks for joining us, Kaz. Thanks for coming by. I've found the more that I've looked at Bridgman over the years, the more I can learn from him, because he isn't necessarily, he's kind of somebody that you have to have some knowledge beforehand in order to really get use out of. You kind of have to say, all right, he's showing me how things fit together in a way that I haven't necessarily looked at before. So, like for instance, even with this, because I'm choosing to draw in like bones underneath and I'm going to put the muscles on top, I know that what happens here, just from studying other anatomy books, is that the end of the humerus kind of forms a kind of a pincher for the end of the ulna, the forearm, the part that actually makes the elbow. It kind of comes in like a hook and fits into that. Now, if I probably look through here in the bones after I finish this drawing, I'll see if I can find a. Well, actually, they kind of show it in this drawing on the bottom of the page, how the humerus comes down and then this kind of hooks in there. So, and that's actually kind of the comparison in these, is that he shows you first a little bit of the mix of the surface anatomy, and then he shows you the same or a very similar pose. Yeah, it's the same pose, but he's showing it to you where he's doing kind of the bones deeper underneath. In fact, that might be part of the confusion. Sometimes he'll draw this stuff and he'll draw the surface and then he'll draw underneath, and you're thinking, well, wait, if you saw this first and then saw that afterwards, then it might make more sense to you. I don't know. That's it's a matter of how people tend to process information, whether they process it from the inside out or the outside in. But in terms of this guy here, so let's say that this is the basic bone structure, and now I want to go in and put some muscles on top of there. Slide that down. I don't know why. For some reason, I feel like I need to have my hand holding the paper while I draw. It feels weird to hold the book while I'm drawing. But yeah, I would try to go through, and I haven't done this in a while, so it's actually kind of nice for me to get back into this exercise. Oh, I realized I didn't really put the shoulder blade in there. I mean, the shoulder blade isn't particularly defined either in the top drawing or the bottom drawing. As a matter of fact, let me slide the camera back a little bit so you can see more. See most of the book. It's a little bit better. And what's nice is that you look at this one drawing, and in this thing, he gives you the overall anatomy of the arm. Then he gives you the muscular anatomy of the same position, and then he shows you the muscles with the arms relaxed, and then he shows it to you with it flexed, showing you how these muscles change. And these are the kind of things that I feel Bridgman is really useful at, is giving you a sense of not just the volume, but what the volumes do, how they change, how they move. So that when you're drawing imaginary figures, for instance, comics, where you're making up your figures and your poses, you can adjust the physiology as you go, depending on the pose that the character has. It's something that I have to fight against. I have to fight against drawing default anatomy. Like, I just generally know the shape, and then I'll tend to draw just, oh, well, this is the shape of that muscle, instead of like really giving a sense of like one muscle flexing and the other set of muscles relaxing in comparison to whatever motion a figure is doing. That's something that I try to be more aware of, because I will default to just sort of like a general, bicep or tricep or quadricep. And these kind of things make a difference in the sense that over time, it's like when you look at a mirror image of something and then you can see that there's things wrong that you didn't pick up before. Over time, if, for instance, I can get myself to the point where I instinctually draw in flexing where it should be and relax muscles where they should be, my figures will just feel more lifelike, even if they're cartoony. And getting to the point where I can do it instinctually will just allow me to then focus more on the storytelling, but on its own, the stuff will still continue to be believable. And when I say believable, I don't mean real photorealistic. What I mean is you believe that the characters are taking the actions or doing the things that they're doing. Your suspense of disbelief will carry you deeper into the story instead of you looking at it and saying, "Oh, that anatomy looks funny." I see Mr. D. Frank popped into the chat. Hey, how you doing? Let's see here. And I mean, I'm tempted here just because I'm drawing to want to keep rendering now and rendering the little shadow and tone that Bridgman puts on, oh, the D, the 4 is an A, so it's Dank Fam. Okay, there we go. Mr. Dank, I see. All right, there we go. Thanks for the clarification. And I will probably get that, I'll probably mess that up again if I catch you in another chat. So apologies, because if I'm tripping and I don't get it another time, you're like, how many times do I got to tell him is Dank? You'll have to tell me a few times because that's just how I am. My brain doesn't, for some reason, is horrible. Like, I'm one of those people where I will see people at a party and I know that I know them and I cannot remember their name for the life of me. And I will go up to them and I'll say hi and I'll say, all right, I feel like a dumbass because I know that I know you. For some reason, the name's not coming to me. But I'd rather do that than just pretend that I feel like you're more of a dumbass if you talk to someone for 10 minutes and then they're like, you don't know my name, do you? So I'd rather just say, I know that I know you. Mr. Dank said that sounds like him when he visits family members. So yeah, that's that's even worse when it's family. All right. So I mean, I could get in here and keep rendering this. That's not the point. The point is, let me move down to the one that's underneath here. Only because the difference in the pose that's underneath, same pose, but the difference is him showing more of the interaction between the radius and the ulna, which is very tricky. For those of you who don't know, the radius is the bone that's on the inside of it, the bone that's closest to your thumb. And the reason why it's called the radius is because it moves. The ulna is the outer side of your arm, and it is actually what the end of the ulna is what forms your elbow. So that is the end of the ulna. This bone runs all the way up the outside of your arm. The radius is called that because it radiates, and by radiates, it moves, meaning it starts on the outside, and when you flip your hand over, it's over on the inside. What's happening is the ulna is still there underneath. The radius flips on top of it. The radius just kind of like, it just goes around in a circle. Like, let's say that that's your ulna. What happens is the radius, as you move your wrist, it moves over and then it moves back. So it radiates around, hence the radius. But the ulna stays stable. So that's what's happening when your wrist crosses, and that's where the name comes from. So minor anatomical detail. And these are the kind of things that, some people think that studying anatomy means spending hours looking at an anatomy book all at once and just trying to memorize the names of bones and muscles. And that's not really how I have learned. The way I've learned is, when I'm in figure drawing class, an instructor may mention a bone or a muscle, and after a while, after hearing it brought up more than once or twice, I'm like, oh, I should probably look that up. And then I look up that particular muscle and I figure out where it is and what it does. and I remember that. And then I just sort of like move through the body in that sense. Like I make it a point to look up things that I don't know when I hear them, but I don't really sit down at one time and do like a massive catalog of anatomy. But another thing is doing stuff like this when you're going through a Bridgman book, because they also have pages where he will give you the names of the different muscles. Like he'll just number them up here, then he'll list them in here and tell you what they do and how they function. Same thing with the upper arm. So as I go through any particular anatomy book and I'm studying it, I'll just sort of like pick up the information as I go. And I think that that's actually probably one of the better ways to learn anatomy, because it doesn't feel like a grind. I think it would be kind of boring to sit down and have to study this all at once. And I did have a project at a different figure drawing class that took a long time ago, where one of our assignments was to make a full life-size, on like a large sheet of butcher paper, a life-size anatomical drawing. So we had to do a drawing on one side, we had to do the skeleton, and the other side we had to do the muscles. So you're drawing a full figure, and it's half of it's muscled, half of it's not. And then we had to go through and label everything on that drawing. So we had to create like basically our own anatomy chart. And I do think that I learned a lot from doing that. It wasn't the most exciting project I've ever worked on. But fortunately, it was one of those things where this wasn't something I was assigned in a class that I was taking for college or in high school. This is like after I'd been well out of school, and I was studying for me. And the things that you want to know when you're studying, the things you want to know when you're studying for yourself, when you want the knowledge so that you can make the artwork you want to make, things that you might normally have thought were boring when you were younger become far more fascinating. So I found that interesting, and I was very into it, but I could tell a lot of the people that were in my class, there were a lot of like more younger college-age students, and they were just like, oh God, this assignment is killing me. I'm just boring the hell out of them. But yeah, I was full on, like, I was really digging it. I got my anatomy nerd on really deep. So I'm just doing a study of this this drawing down here. And the stuff that I'll look for and pay attention to is like looking at the bicep and saying, oh, the bicep, this is where it attaches. It attaches down here. Attaching to the radius, and then sort of, jutting up. And getting these kind of senses, the thing that you learn is that what is it that's making up the shapes you're drawing? That is what's really interesting about studying anatomy in this way, is that they stop becoming just lumps and bumps and tubes. Over time, you really begin to develop an understanding of what's going on with the anatomy, so that you can really see the form and the volume of it. See a quick comment there. Michael Chavez said, I got my first Bridgman book yesterday. Well, awesome. I'm glad to hear it. This is perfect timing. I'd be curious to hear how you plan to use it, because the point of this video was me talking about how I have studied Bridgman, because it can be difficult to learn and to understand sometimes. And for me, I found that just copying his drawings, but not copying them to look directly like what he's doing, but more to try and understand the information that he's putting on each page, that's what I have found useful. So feel free to comment in the chat. Let me know what you found useful about Bridgman, whether you've had a chance to start drawing from him yet, how you're looking forward to using him rather, and his knowledge. And see, that's the funny thing. As I'm drawing this, now my next instinct is to want to fill in all of the muscles that are down here. But he intentionally left that off in this drawing because he wants you to see the crossover that's happening in the bones here. So let's see here. Mr. Dank says, not many libraries here, so I have to use the internet for my studies. Yeah, that is true. It's tough when you can't get books from the library. But yeah, the internet has a lot of handy stuff. In fact, you know what? There may be. I'm not sure if you can rent Kindle books from the library, but somebody sent me a link the other day to an app called Hoopla. I haven't downloaded it yet. I haven't tried it yet. But my understanding is that it allows you to, if you have a library card, to download work digitally. So maybe if there's no libraries near you, the next time you're able to visit a library, it might be worthwhile to pop in if you're if you're on an errand out that way anyway, pop in, get a library card, and then you can rent books from the library. You can rent digital books from home. That's my understanding. Is that's basically like Kindle, but for libraries. And if it'll make it, if it'll open up the access of books that you have, open up the number of books you have access to, it sounds worth it to me. So it's worth checking out. So let's see. Yeah. And then these little diagrams here kind of showing the muscles. I like this one with the muscle flexing. This one up here. And I just realized I was falling into my normal drawing instincts and kind of working on the outer volumes instead of starting with the bones, which is not a horrible thing. I mean, it's light enough that I can go back and draw the, that's the other thing about drawing with the different colors, is that I can draw over the bones with the blue. So if I want to put muscular anatomical detail on top of that, I can do so. And the fact that I started putting those muscles in rather lightly is good. That's kind of the way that I, trying to remember to reinforce, to use a light touch starting out. See, Travis Frederick popped into the chat. What up, Travis? He said, I'm drawing from Bridgman. All right, cool. Everybody's getting their Bridgman ons. Nice, nice. Have a little Bridgman party. Draw the little beak of the elbow going in. This little connection there between the humerus, the upper arm, and the ulna, the lower arm. Travis says, looking good. Thank you. I appreciate it. I don't know if you guys can hear that. One of my cats, Khaleesi, she likes to come in whenever I'm drawing. And she's like, what's up? What's going on? It's funny. Right before I sat down to draw, she hopped into the seat at my drawing table, and I actually took a picture of it. But she was just sitting at my drawing table, just looking up at the art book. So Michael Chavez says, how do you use your Bridgman books? Well, that's what this video is all about. I'm actually showing you how I... hang on a sec. I have to stop a cat from chewing on one of the books. She's mad because I'm giving y'all love instead of spending time with her. So, how I use the Bridgman books is, as opposed to... can Kaz asks, is your cat's name from Game of Thrones? Yes, we named her Khaleesi after Daenerys. Although we also call her Piglet because she tends to eat her sister's cat food. Oh, come here, pigs. Yeah. She always likes to hop in to my lap while I'm drawing sometimes. So that's Khaleesi. And she's just here like, yeah. She's all, yeah, that elbow looks a little funny. She's my strongest art critic. Yeah. She's a little studio art cat. All right, this will turn into a nonstop cat talk otherwise. Let me put her down. All right, sweetie. Get out of there. Ah. Let's see. Travis Frederick says, study his strokes and put it into practice. So yeah, there's approaches in terms of doing master studies of trying to study how they actually, put lines down. My main thing for Bridgman is trying to understand his shapes and his volumes. So when I study Bridgman, it's not necessarily the way that other people would. My whole thing, and this is more responding to Michael's question of how do I use Bridgman's books, is I use it more like going to the gym. I don't really, when I want to research anatomy, there's other books that I will pull out. When I want to kind of apply work to my mental lexicon, when I want to study and remember, I will grab his books and I will sit there and I'll just do studies from them. And the goal of my studies is to try and understand, well, what is the shape of the bicep? What is the shape of the deltoid? What's the shape of the tricep? And I try to look at, and now I'm not even drawing exactly what he's got here because he didn't cover up this part with the deltoid, the top of the shoulder, where the humerus and the shoulder connect. He didn't really draw the deltoid in there, but in my mind, it's like I know it's there, and I'm sort of looking at this, trying to flesh out how these muscles interlock and intertwine. And that's kind of how I tend to study Bridgman. So it's not necessarily that I'm just straight copying him. It's more like I'm trying to analyze his work and see how it all fits. Because I know that even though he's not drawing it here, that the tricep is going to be covering a lot of this back part of the bone that we would be seeing there. I see Syrah Studios popped up. Nice to see you, Syrah. Thanks for joining me as always. Let's switch to another page here. And while we're at it, let me see if this looks a little bit better. Turn this sideways. See what else we got here. I liked some of these drawings right here. These bicep, tricep, forearm. But the fact that you're getting the pecs, you're getting all this interlocking information in that drawing. That I find that very appealing. And there's also on the opposite page, there's a diagram with him kind of like explaining the circular motion, like that it's moving like an arc. In this book, this one's The Human Machine, a lot of the concepts he has in this particular book, he tries to break down the motion similar to different mechanical devices, different types of hinges, stuff that looks like pulleys, and kind of giving you a sense of the arc of how these pieces move. So, let's say for something like this, let me slide this down a little bit more. All right. So for something like, say, this pose, I'm going to start with the bones here, which I didn't do last time. So let's say, and just out of my instinct, I kind of feel like I want to put a little bit of the side of the rib cage in there, like just the arc that it would make coming down. I feel like it needs some context. And I mean, and he gives that context in this one, just not necessarily in the bone pose. But having this come down and hook around, and then the forearm going up. Or rather, I have misspoken. This comes down, and the forearm comes down and hooks around the bottom. The bottom of the ulna, around the bottom of the humerus. So yeah, just starting with simple understanding of the bones, and then putting the muscles on top of it. Travis Frederick also mentioned Bridgman is showing us how to break down the anatomy. Yeah, that's, I think, the big thing that I have taken away from Bridgman is that what Bridgman kind of, in my mind, does is he bridges the gap. Bridgman. He bridges the gap between, like, let's say that you're drawing two cylinders, and that's the forearm, and that's the upper arm, and then maybe a sphere at the end with the shoulder. So those are pretty simple concepts in terms of like how you want to start building your figure. And then what Bridgman does is, in that space between having a hyper-rendered photorealistic drawing, he kind of bridges the gap between that and, well, how does a cylinder, how does a cylinder go from being just a cylinder to being a deltoid that wraps around a bicep that's more relaxed here, a tricep that's flexed but on the backside so you don't see as much of it. And the muscles of the forearm crossing over. And that's the thing, learning how these these muscles connect. That's I think the magic of George Bridgman, is that all of his books and all of his drawings are about how do you go from the primitive shape to adding volume to these muscles, to these forms, And then from that, it's a matter of how detailed you want to get. If you're drawing comics, you may decide that all you need are basic volumes. You may go in there and add a lot of texture. You may go in with light and dark. You may go for a very photorealistic rendering. You may go for leaving it kind of like open lines so that you can do like an animation style coloring. There's a lot of room to grow and interpret and change beyond once you get beyond here. Yes, Travis Frederick chimed in, said he teaches us to see shapes. Well, you know what? I would go one step further. I would say that he teaches us to see shapes, and then he teaches us how to see the volumes within those shapes. They aren't just flat. He teaches us how to understand them as three-dimensional objects. For instance, you can just look at an arm and say, all right, even though this is the bicep here and this is the tricep down here, you can also say that here is the side of the arm, and you can see how that side kind of crosses over each of the different muscles. It crosses over the deltoid, the bicep. Let me see, as you get up here, you're probably going to see a little bit, yeah. That's one of the challenges, is sometimes you start drawing, you're like, oh, I don't want to go right up the middle. You kind of want to say, all right, either there's more on the top or more on the bottom. Because this is so rounded, I'm just going to choose to go on the bottom more. We can kind of say, all right, if this is the top side, I think that Bridgman helps you understand that along with just the individual muscles and the shapes of those muscles, he gives you the sense that there's a top and a bottom and a side. And that the overall form has this, and then the individual forms have this. I think that these are some of the big takeaways from studying Bridgman. Is like at the very start, when I started this video, I drew a simple cube. And I think that Bridgman, like just like with that simple cube, Bridgman helps you see that front, that side, that bottom in both the simple anatomy and in the complex anatomy. Let's see. Sharpen this a little bit. So back over to this guy here. Yeah, I jump around a lot. So if it gets a little confusing, let me know. Because I mean, a lot of this, I'm just sort of shooting from the hip, talking as I go, and it might be possible that I may jumble things up a little bit as I describe them. So if you're like, oh wait, what are you trying to say there? But yeah, starting with the bones, the bone structure, and so I'm going to draw the deeper muscles. I'm going to draw the larger surface muscles on top of this. I'm going to go ahead and draw, even though I'm using red for the bones, I'm going to draw a little bit more of, he kind of describes here the deep muscles that are pulling underneath the larger surface muscles. And they're pulling from the shoulder to the forearm. And these are the kind of things, like these muscles right here, the deep anatomy, I find a little bit harder to understand because you don't see it as well. This is where I would supplement my studies by going and grabbing a different anatomy book, not a Bridgman book, and I would do a comparative study and see, well, how does this compare to how another artist has described it, or even in a book that has like photographic anatomical reference. I would look at those things and compare them, because then you can get a stronger sense of how something looks versus how it feels. I would almost say that when I first had the idea for doing this video, it was last week when we were talking about not necessarily Bridgman not being easy to understand in some cases, but then also talking about how when I first came across the work of Jack Kirby, that I didn't love Kirby. I thought it was kind of chunky and bulky, but part of it was also that I was exposed to early reprints that weren't necessarily as great of quality of his work, but also I didn't nearly understand the energy that he was putting in. Like, much like Kirby, I would say that Bridgman doesn't necessarily draw what muscles are so much as how he's drawing how they feel, I mean, yes, it's important to understand what the muscles are doing if someone's teaching anatomy and, should be drawing muscles that accurately depict what they look like. But I would say that the idea of adding the feel, the pull, the stretch, giving you the sense that it's almost like he's drawing the energy of anatomy. So yeah, I saw Ion Rocks just popped in there and said, yes, Kirby is kinetic. That's where the Bridgman Kirby connection that I see comes in, is the kinetic, the feeling of what these things are. So I'm moving sort of from this drawing now more into adding the anatomy that's up in here. Now, there's a latissimus dorsi that's sort of reaching from the back, and it's kind of coming up underneath the arm, but then also coming underneath the arm, even behind the latissimus dorsi, I think it's the teres major. There's two muscles, the teres major and the teres minor, that sort of fit in together Well, actually, you know what? This might just be the bottom edge of the. That's another one where I would need to pull in a book to look at this, because I do find the anatomy of where everything kind of sinks in a little bit muddy, because in my mind I almost feel like the teres major is mostly sitting on top of the scapula, the shoulder blade, but then it sort of like juts off of it. So in this, I'm drawing something here. This is one of the places where having another book is good to look at. And yeah, Travis also popped in and said Bridgman gives you the energy of his drawings. I think what I'm going to do is when I finish this drawing, I'm going to pull out a different anatomy book, and I'm going to look at which two of these. I just want to check if for sure this is the bottom of the teres major tucking in, or whether it's something else. Because, you know, the whole reason why I do the studies is because it's more like I'm sharing my learning process with you. Like I'll go through and pick a topic that I want to learn or a different anatomical area and try and break it down and understand it. And then I figure sharing that with you guys may be useful to you guys in your own creative studies. But yeah, you can't just watch a video and be like, oh, I know anatomy now. I have watched my figure drawing instructors draw stuff over and over and over again for years, and the information doesn't get into your brain unless you sit down and you draw it yourself. That's just plain simple. It's useful to see how other people break it down. It's extremely useful. But in the end, you kind of have to do the work. Not kind of, you must do the work yourself. That's the only way to retain it. Let's see. Travis Frederick said, how Andrew Loomis? I don't know if you were saying how about Andrew Loomis, but right after that, Michael Chavez said, what other anatomy books do you recommend? Just last week, I think that's what tipped off this conversation, is just last week I pulled some books from my shelf, and and I would say that the first one that I talked about was The Figure by Walt Reed. And I think that he's really good at working you through the basic volumes and then getting into the anatomy. And then moving from anatomy in terms of a descriptive level to sort of like the surface anatomy and how to artistically describe that. So I'd say in terms of my current go-tos is Walt Reed's The Figure, the Atlas of Human Anatomy for the Artist. This one is sort of my go-to for when I need to do deep studies, and this is what I'm going to look at to kind of check what muscles are what in this drawing. So, and I know it sounds kind of weird to have one anatomy book and then checking the other one, because it's like, if this is the book that has information, then why even bother having the first one? But you get different things from different anatomy books. For instance, a lot of the stuff in the Peck book tends to be, it is not kinetic. It is very descriptive. It's very well detailed, but it is more like anatomical charts. Now, there are Bridgman-like drawings in this book, and when Bridgman-like, I mean it only that it's somewhat more cartoony in the sense that it's less about looking exactly like the muscle and more about describing. And that's sort of the big difference. That's what I think Bridgman really brings to the work. But while there are drawings like that, overall, a lot of the book is more of detailed, finely rendered anatomy charts. So this is very much clearly just accounting for all of the muscles in the body. So this book is really handy for that. That's where, I wanted to express the idea that you get different information from different books. How did I move this camera? There we go. And then, of course, there's Andrew Loomis, Figure Drawing for All It's Worth. This book is definitely a classic. I would say that this is probably one of my my go-tos for just studying human anatomy, not human anatomy, but for studying figure drawing in general, for working with the figure. It is not anywhere near in terms of the anatomical charts that the other books have. This is really about this book is about how to move the figure through space. So, being someone who's a comic book artist, I think that for comic creators, animators, viz dev artists, this book is probably one of the best in terms of being in your art library. So, I consider that an excellent book. So, I would say any of these books, in addition to Bridgman, is a solid start. But also, the important thing to remember is that the books are just a starting point. I continue to mention all the time that I'm a huge advocate for figure drawing classes. And there are YouTube channels where they have figure drawing posters you can work from. I think that if you live far away from any actual drawing workshops, that it's better than nothing. But I don't think there's anything that can truly replace the experience of being in a room with a model, studying them. And whether it's getting a friend or family member to pose for you, or if you're able to go to a local junior college, or if you happen to live someplace that has an art community, and maybe they have figure drawing workshops that you can attend. But taking what you think you know about the human body, and that's the experience I have, is that I come in with a lot of, I don't want to say preconceived notions, but I come in with a lot of, oh, I've looked at this book, I've studied that book, I think I know what these muscles do and what they look like. And then having those beliefs tested hard and realizing, oh, wait, I really don't understand, say, the structure of the knee the way I thought I did. Or, wow, all of these hands look horrible. I look at my hands every day, and yet I still don't seem to be able to draw them the way that they really look with this model. And then it forces you to go back to the books. It forces you to go back to Bridgman, to Loomis, to Walt Reed, to Peck, and re-examine. You have to go back and look at it and say, oh, wait, this really doesn't connect in the way that I thought it did. And sometimes you have to take the information of multiple art books, and together it forms a broader picture of what the human form is really like. Like even this right here, I feel like what I'm drawing isn't really describing what the muscles are doing, at least not to the degree that I want. But I think part of it was that I didn't put in I wanted to put in a little bit of overlap to separate the flexors from the extensors. The muscles that are on the inside of your, it's kind of hard to see this without seeing my whole arm. The muscles that are on the inside are the ones that are flexing. And the muscles that are on the outside along here are extending. When these muscles, when I flex my hand like that, or when I extend my hand like that, the muscles out here are pulling them back. And just the opposite, and they relax in here. The muscles in here, when I flex, they're pulling them in. So all of that's happening up in the forearm. And for some reason, when I was drawing this one, I feel like Bridgman he's not exaggerating here. The muscles, you don't really see a hard definition in here. And that's kind of one of the challenging subtleties to try and learn how to describe. Because you don't see that hard line in here, but I feel like as I'm drawing this, in order to understand the tops and the sides, I'm adding detail that isn't necessarily there in the drawing. So I can say, oh, right, this is how these muscles actually lay as volumes on top of the bone, even if there isn't really this hard division between the two. So yeah, this is basically, back to that earlier question that Michael asked, this is basically how I use Bridgman. I sit down, I look, I study from it, I look at what doesn't look right, I look at what I don't understand, I look at what I thought I understood but turns out to be wrong, And speaking of which, let me, hang on, just fill this in a little bit more. Putting in this little detail here, this little bit of tone, just helps me separate these masses and kind of say side planes or the undersides that are turning away versus the top planes. Now, what I wanted to do, and I feel like there needs to be a little division here. Yeah, well, I kind of got that. Okay, we're down to about the last 5 minutes. We're almost done here. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. Let me pull up that the Peck book. Couple more comments from the chat. I see Epic Trilogy popped in. Glad you could make it. Good to see it. Ion Rock says, this is why I was simplifying basic shapes and passable imagery. Yeah, you start with the simple and then you slowly build towards the complex. And Travis Frederick says, consistent study and practice. That is one of the things, like, honestly, doing these studies, I used to do this twice a year. I would just copy a Bridgman book. Like, I would just sit down for like 20 minutes a day and study from it. That I haven't been doing as much. I've been doing more of studying my my figure drawing work from class and breaking down and analyzing that. But studying just from the books, I haven't been doing enough of. I need to get back to it. I see the Epic Trilogy also said, I've never seen that Loomis book and it looks good. Yes, the Loomis books were out of print for a very, very long time. And when they were out of print, people started making PDFs of the books available online because you couldn't get the information anywhere else. I think probably like 5, maybe even 10 years ago now. It's been a while. But they started putting the books back in print. And they have all of his books now. You can get Figure Drawing for All It's Worth. You can get Fun with a Pencil. Just like 3 or 4 other books he has. So I started with Figure Drawing for All It's Worth because that's the main one that I have found useful. But all of his books are fantastic. And Ion Rocks requested, can I request you create a Seraphim again? I did a drawing for him as a thank you for a very nice gift that he gave me. And yes, I can totally do a Seraphim for you. So, let's see. What was it I was looking for? All right, so the upraised arm. Let me see if I can find a page that has... Now, this isn't the exact pose. Now, see, yeah, all right. So I'm not crazy. It is a different side of the body. Because, I mean, in looking at the Bridgman drawing is looking more like a head on with someone's arm raised. This one is someone's arm raised, but they're, well, it's their arm sort of half raised and flexed. Let me see if I can find this exact pose. Because it also kind of gives the appearance like you're looking a little bit at, all right, now see this, yeah, this is kind of what we're looking at, but even this is still at more of a side angle. And the thing I was concerned about is that I was imagining that you could see the teres major when in fact, if you're looking at it from the front, I was concerned about how well it's really visible. Whereas at a 3/4 angle, I feel like you could see more of it. Let me see. There's a lot of good stuff in here that I have not studied enough from. Bern Hogarth's books. I see that Mac CB25 or Matt, I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce your screen name, but he asked, what about Bern Hogarth's books? Do you like them? Well, let's see. I do have dynamic anatomy, and I have dynamic, I think it's dynamic drapery and folds. I can't remember the exact name of it, but it's his drapery book. I have those two. I found that the problem with Hogarth is that all of the muscles are flexed at once. And this is not something that I was aware of when I first started looking at his drawings, because I got that book back when I was in high school. I didn't understand enough about it. I've heard, let me put it this way, his books are useful in the fact they have interesting poses, they show a lot of anatomy, but they're exaggerated in a way that it can be misleading. That's the thing about Hogarth. I don't dislike the books. I have them, but I haven't looked at them as much in recent years. So it's really more it really comes to that fact that if every single muscle is flexed, then you don't get the sense of what the muscles also look like when they relax in comparison. So the comparative anatomy is kind of what I have a problem with. So I'm not gonna say no, don't ever look at a Hogarth book. I'm just saying that there was a point where I was into his work, and I've moved away from them to other anatomy books, more like the Bridgmans, the Loomis, and something like this book, the Peck book. At some point, I need to make a video that's just a tour of my art books. In fact, that will probably be a Patreon exclusive. So if you want to check out that, a little tour of my anatomy and my drawing book library, sometime in the next few months, I will make a video exclusively just for that. So let's see here. All right, but I really went off from what I was originally looking for, which was just to make sure that I understood what was going on muscular-wise. So the latissimus dorsi is the major muscle that is going up underneath the armpit. So the way that it's drawn here, that's pretty much what it is. And then the latissimus dorsi, not the latissimus dorsi, the teres major is sort of resting on the outside of that. And the way I've seen it described, it's sort of like it's resting underneath. Let me see if I can find a picture of it from the back. But anyway, yeah, so that's the teres major. Latissimus dorsi. It's almost like as if you were to look at breaking this down into very simple forms. You could almost say that here's a rib cage. In the front, you've got the pec muscles going up. In the back, you've got the latissimus dorsi and the teres major going up. Let's say that I'm flattening them out just for the sake of example. Now, coming out from in between them, and all of this is covered by the deltoid where they connect. And that's one of the reasons why it's hard to study. But coming out from there is the arm. So you've got your triceps on the bottom, your biceps on the top. But it's sort of like there's muscles that are kind of coming out underneath, but the latissimus dorsi tucks in on one side. And that's where one of the things I need to do deeper study in terms of the interlocking, because the latissimus dorsi tucks in, and I believe the teres major goes with the deltoid and goes on the outside, or it could just be that the deltoid covers the whole thing. This is one of those things that I've been shown this by my instructor, Carl Ganas, the figure drawing classes I take at the Guild, and I can never remember. I always know that the latissimus goes inside, then the other muscles go on the outside, but I can't remember if the teres also goes with it or whether it's just the deltoid that you're seeing out there. I've probably got another anatomy book somewhere that shows exactly what that is. But that's why when you look at this, the Bridgman drawing, you can see that the muscles going in. Yeah, the way Bridgman has it, it's like definitely both the teres and latissimus dorsi going in, and it's really just, he almost has it where it's like the tricep is out here, and that from this angle, you're not even gonna see what's on the other side, but on the back side of it, kind of as a cap, is the other side of the deltoid. The deltoid is like the cap to this whole ball of muscles. It comes around the other side. All right. And I see American Swordfish popped in. Late to the party, but you know what? We're glad to have you. But the party is wrapping up. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. So thank you for showing up, guys. I really appreciate it. Like I said, if you enjoy these videos, if you enjoy the comics that I create, if you enjoy the artwork that I post on social media, then please check out my Patreon. Patreon.gerimi.com. My Patreon, you can subscribe. I'll be putting up exclusive videos, blogs, early access to my comics. And, you know, there's links in the video description as well. And also, please like, subscribe, and share the videos if you enjoy them. That's it for now. Go be creative.